"Dr. Carter, you're fired." The words sliced through Mercy General Hospital's emergency department like a scalpel. Dr. Vanessa Carter stood frozen, blood still wet on her gloves, the same blood from the elderly man whose heart she'd just restarted with her bare hands. "You performed surgery without authorization," her supervisor continued, voice cold as ice. Vanessa's whisper was barely audible. "He was dying. Leave now, before I call security." At just 54, the resident seemed to shrink as she walked through the hallway. The silence was deafening. Colleagues turned away, refusing to meet her eyes. Whispers erupted behind her back. A few shook their heads. Was it pity or regret? She'd saved a life and destroyed her career in the same breath. But then, the thunderous roar of rotor blades shattered the afternoon quiet. Vanessa had barely reached the parking lot when a Navy helicopter descended from the sky like something out of an action movie. Its massive gray hull blocked out the sun. Security guards scattered in every direction. Patients pressed their faces against windows, phones raised to record what was happening. The aircraft's door flew open. Commander Logan Hayes stepped out, his voice cutting through the chaos like a command from God himself. "I need Dr. Vanessa Carter, now." A nurse pointed frantically toward the parking lot, shouting over the noise. "She was just fired. Then get her back here immediately." Logan barked into his radio, his face grim. "We have a pilot down at sea. Severe chest trauma, critical condition. We need someone with combat medical experience, and there's only one person within 500 miles who qualifies." The woman they'd just thrown out for saving a life was about to become their only hope for saving another. But what nobody knew, not the hospital, not her colleagues, not even the Navy commander demanding her help, was that Vanessa Carter carried far more than medical knowledge. She carried secrets, dangerous secrets, military secrets, secrets that were about to turn everything upside down. Quick pause before we continue. If you're watching this from somewhere in the world right now, let me know in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're enjoying stories like this, make sure to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because tomorrow's episode, it goes even deeper than this. Vanessa sat in her beaten Honda Civic, hands trembling as she gripped the steering wheel. The adrenaline from the emergency surgery was wearing off, replaced by the crushing reality of unemployment. She straightened her shoulders unconsciously, a habit from years of standing at attention, though she'd never told her colleagues where that posture came from. The hospital's automatic doors slid open as Dr. Raymond Pierce emerged. His imposing 6-foot frame and silver hair commanded immediate attention from the gathering crowd of staff members. Pierce had been chief of surgery for 12 years, and his reputation for rigid enforcement of hospital protocols was legendary throughout San Diego's medical community. "I want everyone to understand what happened in there," Pierce announced, his deep voice carrying across the parking lot with the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. "Dr. Carter violated multiple protocols. She performed an unauthorized thoracotomy without proper supervision, without following established procedures, and without regard for this institution's liability." The crowd murmured, most nodding in agreement. Few people challenged Dr. Pierce's pronouncements. His medical expertise was undeniable, and his political influence within the hospital system had ended careers before. Dr. Patricia Morrison, the hospital's administrative director, stood beside Pierce, looking uncomfortable with the public nature of his declaration, but unwilling to contradict the chief of surgery in front of the staff. "Always too aggressive," Pierce continued, his tone sharp with disapproval. "I've been saying it for months. She's reckless, dangerous even. You can't just cut into someone's chest because you feel like it. Medicine is about following procedures, not playing hero." A young intern near the back of the crowd raised his hand tentatively. "But Dr. Pierce, she saved his life, didn't she?" Pierce's expression hardened, his gray eyes focusing on the intern with the intensity of a predator identifying prey. That's not the point, Dr. Wilson. Medicine is about following procedures, not gambling with patients' lives. What if she'd killed him? What if there were complications we couldn't handle? She put this entire hospital at risk. And frankly, she put all of your careers at risk by association. The intern's face flushed red, and he stepped back into the crowd, properly intimidated. Pierce's message was clear. Questioning his judgment was a career-limiting move. Meanwhile, 3 miles offshore on the USS Theodore Roosevelt, Commander Logan Hayes was receiving the worst possible news. His radio crackled with urgency as the flight deck officer's voice broke through the static. "Commander, we have an emergency. Lieutenant Thompson went down during a training exercise. His F-18 Super Hornet experienced engine failure at 12,000 feet. He managed to eject, but the impact was severe. We're looking at massive chest trauma, possible cardiac involvement." Logan's jaw tightened. He'd seen enough combat injuries to know what massive chest trauma meant. Time wasn't just critical, it was everything. "What's his status now?" "Unconscious, vitals dropping. Our ship's doctor is good, but this is beyond anything he's handled. We need someone with real combat medical experience, someone who's worked on chest trauma under impossible conditions." Logan's mind raced through every military medical contact he had within 500 nautical miles. The Navy's best trauma surgeon was in Norfolk. The Marines' top field medic was deployed overseas. The Air Force specialist was in Germany. Then something clicked in his memory. A name he had heard whispered in certain circles, always with respect, sometimes with awe. "Carter," he said quietly, then louder into his radio. "There's someone at Mercy General Hospital in San Diego, Dr. Vanessa Carter. I need you to prep the chopper immediately." His communications officer looked puzzled. "Sir, is she Navy?" "Just prep the bird," Logan ordered, already moving toward the flight deck. "And tell the pilot we're going to need emergency authorization to land on a civilian hospital." Back at Mercy General Hospital, Vanessa remained in her car, watching through the windshield as her former colleagues dispersed back into the building. She'd given 4 years to this place, working double shifts, studying every spare moment, trying to prove herself worthy of the surgical residency she'd earned through sheer determination. But she'd never been able to shake the feeling that Dr. Pierce was looking for reasons to dismiss her. From her first week, he'd questioned her unconventional approaches, criticized her speed in emergency situations, and repeatedly emphasized that proper protocol was more important than rapid intervention. A soft knock on her passenger window made her look up. Rachel Bennett, a nurse from the trauma unit, gestured for her to roll down the window. Rachel was one of the few people who'd shown Vanessa genuine kindness during her residency. "Hey," Rachel said softly, leaning down to window level. "You okay?" Vanessa managed a weak smile. "Been better, definitely been better." "What you did in there?" Rachel glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then continued. "That was incredible. I've never seen anyone work that fast, that precisely. Where did you learn to do a thoracotomy like that?" The question hung in the air. Vanessa had been asked variations of it countless times during her residency. How did a 28-year-old resident have the steady hands of a 20-year veteran? How did she know exactly which instruments to call for before the attending physician even assessed the situation? How did she remain so calm when everyone else was panicking? "Textbooks," Vanessa said simply. "Lots of studying." Rachel's expression suggested she didn't entirely believe that answer, but she didn't push. "Well, whoever taught you, they taught you right. That man is going to see his grandchildren grow up because of what you did today." A flash of memory crossed Vanessa's mind. Another chest wound, another race against time, but instead of sterile hospital walls, it had been the inside of a medical tent with mortar rounds exploding in the distance. She pushed the memory away quickly. "Thanks, Rachel. That means a lot." Above them, the sound of rotor blades was growing louder. Though neither woman paid much attention initially, helicopters weren't uncommon near the hospital. Medical evacuations happened regularly, but this sound was different, heavier, more purposeful. Rachel straightened up, squinting at the sky. That's not our usual medevac bird. The helicopter that appeared over the hospital's main building was clearly military. A Navy MH-60 Seahawk, its gray paint scheme and official markings visible even from the parking lot. It circled once, then began its descent toward the hospital's rooftop helipad. Inside the building, chaos erupted immediately. Patients and visitors pressed against windows, phones coming out to record the unexpected arrival. Security guards scrambled to understand what was happening, their radios crackling with confused chatter. Dr. Pierce burst out of the hospital's main entrance, his face red with fury at this disruption to his carefully ordered domain. What is going on? He demanded of anyone within earshot. Did someone call for a military evacuation? We have protocols for this. The helicopter touched down with practiced precision, its rotors still spinning as the side door slid open. Commander Logan Hayes stepped out, his Navy dress uniform impeccable despite the wind from the rotors. Behind him came a crew chief and a medic, both moving with the efficient urgency of military personnel on a mission. Logan strode toward the hospital entrance, his bearing unmistakably that of an officer accustomed to command. He approached the first person in hospital scrubs he could find, a confused-looking orderly who pointed him toward Dr. Pierce. "Sir," Logan said, his voice cutting through the noise of the helicopter. "I'm Commander Hayes, United States Navy. I need to speak with Dr. Vanessa Carter immediately. We have a medical emergency requiring her specific expertise." Dr. Pierce drew himself up to his full height, clearly irritated by the military officer's presumptuous tone. "Commander, I appreciate the Navy's enthusiasm, but I must inform you that Dr. Carter is no longer employed by this hospital. She was terminated less than an hour ago for serious violations of medical protocol." Logan's expression shifted from professional courtesy to barely controlled surprise. Terminated for what? Pierce's voice took on the condescending tone he typically reserved for medical students who disappointed him. "She performed unauthorized surgery, violated multiple hospital policies, endangered a patient's life with reckless disregard for proper procedure. I can recommend several other qualified physicians who can assist with your emergency. Physicians who actually follow established medical protocols." The commander's mind raced. The intel he'd received about Carter was sparse but compelling, someone with extensive combat medical experience who'd ended up in civilian medicine. The termination actually explained a lot. Combat medics were trained to save lives first and worry about paperwork later. That mindset didn't always translate well to civilian hospitals run by bureaucrats. "Sir, with respect, we don't have time for alternatives. Our pilot is critical, and from what I understand, Dr. Carter has the specific experience we need." "Where is she now?" Pierce's expression hardened further. He was accustomed to having his medical expertise deferred to, not questioned by some military officer who clearly didn't understand hospital administration. "Commander, I understand your situation may seem urgent to you, but I cannot in good conscience recommend someone who just demonstrated a clear and dangerous disregard for proper medical procedure. What Dr. Carter did today was not medicine. It was cowboy behavior that could have killed that patient." From across the parking lot, Rachel Bennett had been watching the exchange with growing alarm. She looked down at Vanessa, who was sitting in stunned silence as she processed what was happening. "They're asking for you," Rachel said. "The Navy is asking for you specifically." Vanessa's heart began to race. This wasn't possible. She'd been so careful to keep her past buried to present herself as just another resident working her way through the medical system. How could they know? What could they possibly know? "There has to be some mistake," she said quietly. But even as she spoke the words, Part of her recognized the signs. The military precision of the helicopter landing, the urgency in the commander's voice, the specific request for her by name. This wasn't a random medical consultation. This was something that required her particular background. Logan was growing frustrated with the bureaucratic roadblocks. Dr. Pierce's arrogant dismissal of the emergency was exactly the kind of civilian red tape that got people killed in the field. Dr. Pierce, I need you to understand something. We have a 26-year-old Navy pilot who is going to die if we don't get him proper medical attention within the next 2 hours. I've been told that Dr. Carter has experience with combat trauma that makes her uniquely qualified to help us. Every minute we spend talking is a minute we're losing. Pierce's face flushed with anger. Commander, you need to understand something as well. Dr. Carter just performed surgery without authorization. She cut into a patient's chest without following proper procedures, without proper supervision, without proper preparation. She's a loose cannon who thinks medical protocols don't apply to her. She saved his life. A voice interrupted. Rachel Bennett had approached the group, with Vanessa walking slowly behind her. That patient is alive because Dr. Carter acted when everyone else was following protocol instead of helping him. Pierce turned his attention to Rachel with the same dismissive arrogance he'd shown the intern earlier. Nurse Bennett, you are speaking about medical matters that are beyond your scope of practice. I suggest you return to your duties before you find yourself facing disciplinary action as well. The threat was clear and public, designed to humiliate Rachel in front of the gathered staff. But Rachel had worked with Vanessa for months and had seen the woman's incredible skill firsthand. Dr. Pierce, with all due respect, I was in that room. I saw what happened. Everyone else was debating protocols while that man was dying. Dr. Carter saved his life. Logan turned to see the small woman in wrinkled scrubs approaching. Even from a distance, something about her movement caught his attention. She didn't walk like a typical doctor. There was something more controlled about her gait, more aware of her surroundings. "Dr. Carter?" he asked. Vanessa nodded silently, studying the commander's face while acutely aware of Dr. Pierce's hostile glare. She could see Logan evaluating her, trying to reconcile whatever information he'd been given with the woman standing in front of him. "Commander, I'm Dr. Carter. I understand you have a medical emergency, but I think there might be some confusion. I'm just a resident. I don't have any special expertise that would warrant." She paused, glancing at the military helicopter. This level of response. Logan pulled out a secure tablet and scrolled through the limited information he'd been able to access. "Ma'am, I was told you have experience with chest trauma, specifically combat-related chest trauma. Is that accurate?" The question hit Vanessa like a physical blow. Combat-related chest trauma, someone knew. Someone had connected dots that she'd worked very hard to keep disconnected. I'm not sure what you mean," she said carefully. But Logan was trained to read people, and her hesitation told him everything he needed to know. "Ma'am, I have a pilot whose life depends on getting the right medical care. If you have the experience I think you do, then I need you to come with us now." Dr. Pierce stepped between them, his territorial instincts fully activated. "Commander, absolutely not. Dr. Carter is not going anywhere in any official capacity. She's been terminated, and she certainly cannot represent this hospital on any military operation. I will not have this institution's reputation damaged further by her reckless behavior." "Then she won't be representing your hospital," Logan said firmly, his patience with the pompous administrator finally exhausted. "She'll be consulting directly with the United States Navy. Dr. Carter, will you help us?" Vanessa looked around at the faces surrounding her. Dr. Pierce's expression was a mixture of fury and betrayal, as if she were personally responsible for undermining his authority. Rachel Bennett was encouraging her with her eyes. The other staff members who had gathered were watching with curiosity and confusion. "Did you catch that medical detail?" Comment below if you've ever seen combat medics in action. Their stories are incredible. And in that moment, Vanessa realized she was standing at a crossroads. She could continue to deny her background, insist that she was just a resident with no special qualifications, and walk away from whatever crisis was unfolding at sea. Or she could acknowledge the truth she'd been hiding for the past 4 years and step back into a world she'd tried to leave behind. The decision was made for her when Logan's radio crackled with an urgent update from the ship. "Commander, pilot's condition is deteriorating rapidly. We're looking at possible cardiac tamponade. Medical officer estimates we have maybe 90 minutes before we lose him." Vanessa's medical training kicked in immediately. Cardiac tamponade, blood accumulating in the pericardium, compressing the heart, preventing it from filling properly. It was a death sentence without immediate intervention, and it required surgical skills that most doctors never developed because they never worked in environments where such injuries were common. But she had developed those skills in circumstances she'd never told her colleagues about, under conditions that most civilian doctors couldn't imagine. "How far out is your ship?" she heard herself asking. 4 minutes by air," Logan replied, "plus whatever time it takes us to get airborne." Vanessa did the math quickly. By the time they reached the ship, they'd have maybe 30 to 40 minutes to save the pilot's life. It was cutting it close, but it was doable if the person operating had experience working under extreme pressure. Dr. Pierce's voice cut through her calculations like a scalpel. "Dr. Carter, you are not authorized to participate in any medical procedures. You have been terminated from this institution, and if you attempt to practice medicine without proper credentials, I will personally ensure that you face legal consequences." The threat was delivered with the cold precision of a man accustomed to destroying careers. Pierce had spent years building his reputation as the guardian of proper medical protocols, and he wasn't about to let some rogue resident undermine everything he'd worked for. "Sir," Vanessa said quietly, looking directly at Pierce, "I resign my position effective immediately." She turned to Logan. "Commander, what do you need me to do?" Pierce's face turned purple with rage. "You cannot simply resign in the middle of a disciplinary action. There are procedures, protocols, legal requirements." "Dr. Pierce," Logan said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd commanded men in combat. "With all due respect, your procedures and protocols are not my concern. My concern is keeping a Navy pilot alive. Dr. Carter, are you ready to go?" The relief on Logan's face was immediate and visible. "We need you to come with us to the USS Theodore Roosevelt. Our medical officer will brief you on the pilot's condition during the flight. Are you ready to go now?" Vanessa looked down at her scrubs, then at the small group of people watching her. "I need to get some things from my locker." "Make it fast," Logan said. "Every minute counts." As Vanessa hurried toward the hospital entrance, Rachel Bennett fell into step beside her. "Are you sure about this?" Rachel asked quietly. "No," Vanessa admitted, "but that pilot doesn't have any other options." Behind them, Dr. Pierce was addressing the gathered crowd, his voice carrying across the parking lot. "Let this be a lesson to everyone. Dr. Carter's reckless disregard for proper protocol has now escalated to abandoning her responsibilities entirely. This is what happens when physicians think they're above the established order of medical practice." Inside the hospital, word of the military emergency was spreading quickly. Staff members lined the hallways, watching as Vanessa retrieved personal items from her locker. Some of the same colleagues who'd been whispering about her reckless behavior an hour earlier now looked at her with newfound curiosity. Dr. Pierce intercepted her near the elevator, his imposing presence blocking her path. "Carter, what's this really about? Why would the Navy specifically request a resident? What aren't you telling me?" Vanessa met his gaze steadily, and for the first time in 4 years, she didn't try to make herself smaller in his presence. I don't know, Dr. Pierce. Maybe they heard about my textbook knowledge. Her tone was even, but Pierce caught something underneath it. A confidence that hadn't been there during her residency. A hint of steel that suggested there were depths to this woman he'd never suspected. This isn't over, Carter. When you get back, if you get back, we're going to have a very serious conversation about your background and your qualifications. I'm going to get to the bottom of who you really are. Vanessa paused at the elevator doors, looking back at the man who had made her life miserable for months. Dr. Pierce, I think you're about to find out more about who I really am than you ever wanted to know. Back on the rooftop, Logan was coordinating with his crew while keeping one eye on the hospital entrance. His tablet showed the pilot's vitals streaming in real time from the ship, and none of the numbers were encouraging. Heart rate erratic, blood pressure dropping, oxygen saturation falling despite mechanical ventilation. When Vanessa emerged from the hospital, she carried a small bag and moved with purpose toward the helicopter. Logan noticed that she approached the aircraft differently than most civilians. No hesitation about the spinning rotors, no uncertainty about where to step or how to enter the cabin. "Ma'am," the crew chief said, offering his hand to help her up. "Thank you," Vanessa replied, but she'd already pulled herself into the cabin with the easy motion of someone familiar with military aircraft. Logan climbed in behind her and signaled the pilot. As the helicopter lifted off, he turned to brief Vanessa on what they were facing. Lieutenant Marcus Thompson, 26 years old, single-engine fighter pilot. His ejection seat functioned properly, but the parachute landing was hard. Our initial assessment shows severe chest trauma, possible cardiac involvement. He's been unconscious since the rescue. Vitals are deteriorating. Vanessa listened carefully, her mind already working through the possibilities. What kind of chest trauma are we talking about? Blunt force, penetrating. Blunt force from the ejection and water impact, but there's evidence of internal bleeding, and our medical officer suspects the heart might be compromised. Has anyone done imaging? Ship's equipment is limited. We have basic X-ray capability, but nothing sophisticated. Vanessa nodded. Working without full diagnostic capabilities was something she was familiar with, though she couldn't explain that to Logan without revealing more than she was ready to share. As the helicopter flew toward the ship, Logan found himself studying his passenger. The woman sitting across from him didn't match his expectations. She was smaller than he'd imagined, quieter, more reserved, but there was something about her focus, the way she asked questions that suggested depths he hadn't anticipated. "Dr. Carter," he said carefully, "can I ask where you developed your experience with trauma medicine?" It was a reasonable question, and Vanessa had been preparing for it since they'd taken off. "Emergency medicine rotation," she said simply. "High-volume trauma center. You see a lot of different cases." It wasn't technically a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Logan sensed there was more to the story, but he didn't push. His priority was getting the medical expertise he needed to save his pilot, not satisfying his curiosity about his consultant's background. Below them, Mercy General Hospital was shrinking into the distance. But the confrontation on the rooftop had been recorded by multiple phones and was already starting to spread on social media. Dr. Pierce's public humiliation of a resident, followed by that resident being urgently requested by the Navy for a life or death mission, was exactly the kind of story that went viral in the age of instant communication. The flight to the USS Theodore Roosevelt took 42 minutes. As they approached the massive aircraft carrier, Vanessa looked out at the organized chaos of the flight deck. Planes being moved, crews running predetermined patterns, everything happening with military precision. "Ever been on a carrier before?" Logan asked. "No," Vanessa lied smoothly. "It's impressive." The helicopter touched down on the designated landing area, and immediately a team of sailors appeared to guide them toward the ship's medical bay. As they crossed the flight deck, Vanessa kept her head down, hoping to avoid recognition by anyone who might know her from her previous life. But as they approached the island's superstructure, she caught sight of someone that made her blood run cold. A familiar figure in khaki uniform standing near the entrance to the medical bay, Chief Petty Officer Derek Walsh, someone who would definitely remember her from her deployments overseas. She pulled the borrowed navy cap lower over her face and stayed close behind Logan, hoping Walsh wouldn't notice her. But as they passed, she heard him call out, "Hey, Hayes, that your trauma specialist." Logan paused. "Yeah, Dr. Carter, she's our consultant." Walsh squinted at Vanessa's partially hidden face. "Carter, that name sounds familiar. You sure we haven't met before, Doc?" Vanessa kept her voice steady and slightly higher than normal. "I don't think so, Chief. I'd remember." Walsh studied her for another moment, then shrugged. "Maybe just one of those faces. Come on, your patient's this way." As they entered the medical bay, Vanessa felt the familiar environment wash over her. The antiseptic smell, the organized layout of emergency equipment, the tension of medical personnel working under pressure. It was all exactly as she remembered from her deployments. The ship's medical officer, a Navy commander named Dr. Jennifer Cole, met them at the entrance. "Dr. Carter, thank God you're here. Our pilot is in serious trouble." Dr. Cole led them to where Lieutenant Thompson lay unconscious on a biomedical table. The young pilot's condition was immediately apparent. His breathing was shallow and labored. His skin had a grayish pallor, and the monitors showed all the classic signs of cardiac tamponade. Vanessa approached the table and began her assessment, her movements becoming more confident as she fell into the familiar rhythm of emergency medicine. She palpated the pilot's chest, checking for specific signs she'd learned to recognize in combat zones. "How long has he been like this?" she asked Dr. Cole. "About 3 hours since the accident. He was conscious initially, but his condition has been deteriorating steadily." Vanessa checked the monitors, noting the elevated central venous pressure and the characteristic pattern that confirmed her suspicions. "He's got blood in the pericardium," she said quietly. "We need to relieve the pressure immediately." Dr. Cole nodded grimly. "That's what I was afraid of. The problem is none of us have experience with pericardiocentesis under these conditions. In a civilian hospital, we'd have a full surgical team, proper imaging, controlled environment. But we don't have those options here," Vanessa said, her voice taking on a tone of authority that surprised everyone in the room. "So we work with what we have." She moved to the equipment cabinet and began pulling out supplies, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. Logan watched, noting how she seemed to know exactly where everything was located, exactly what instruments she needed. "Dr. Carter," Dr. Cole said carefully, "pericardiocentesis is an extremely risky procedure if we nick the heart or a major vessel. He dies," Vanessa finished. "And if we don't do anything, he dies anyway. But if we do this right, he lives." She turned to face the room, and for the first time since arriving on the ship, her voice carried the unmistakable authority of someone who had performed this exact procedure under much worse conditions. "I need everyone to listen carefully. We're going to do this by the numbers. Dr. Cole, I need you to monitor his vitals and be ready to assist. Commander Hayes, I need you to maintain pressure on his IV lines. Chief Walsh, make sure we have emergency medications ready in case we need them." As she spoke, Vanessa was setting up the procedure, her movements becoming more precise and confident with each passing moment. The medical staff around her began to notice the change in her demeanor. The hesitant resident from the hospital parking lot had been replaced by someone who clearly knew exactly what she was doing. But as she prepared to begin the life-saving procedure, none of them realized they were about to witness skills that had been developed in some of the most dangerous combat zones in the world, by someone who had saved more lives under impossible conditions than any of them could imagine. Meanwhile, back at Mercy General Hospital, Dr. Pierce was dealing with the fallout from the afternoon's events. His phone was ringing constantly. Reporters, hospital administrators, medical colleagues, all wanting to know about the resident who had been fired and then urgently requested by the Navy. "This is nonsense," he told the hospital's legal department. "The woman was terminated for violating protocols. The fact that the military wants her doesn't change that. If anything, it proves that she's the kind of loose cannon who doesn't belong in civilian medicine." But even as he spoke the words, Pierce was beginning to worry. The video footage of his confrontation with the Navy commander was already circulating online, and the comments weren't favorable. People were questioning why a hospital would fire someone who saved a life, especially someone the military considered valuable enough to request by name. His assistant knocked on his office door. "Dr. Pierce, Channel 7 News is here. They want to interview you about Dr. Carter." Pierce straightened his tie and prepared to control the narrative. He'd spent years building his reputation as a guardian of medical excellence. He wasn't about to let some rogue resident destroy everything he'd worked for. "Send them in," he said. "It's time people understood what really happened here today." But unknown to Dr. Pierce, the story he was about to tell would soon be contradicted by events unfolding on a Navy ship 50 miles offshore, where the woman he had dismissed as a dangerous loose cannon was about to demonstrate skills that would change everything. Military families know the importance of comprehensive life insurance coverage. Veterans often qualify for specialized policies with combat experience benefits that protect their loved ones during dangerous deployments overseas. The procedure began with Vanessa positioning herself at the optimal angle for the needle insertion. In the tense silence of the medical bay, her voice was steady and controlled as she explained each step. "Subxiphoid approach," she said quietly, more to herself than to the others. 45-degree angle aiming for the left shoulder." Dr. Cole watched in fascination as Vanessa's hands moved with surgical precision. The needle entered exactly where it should, with no hesitation or uncertainty. This wasn't the technique of someone who'd read about the procedure in textbooks. This was the skill of someone who'd performed it multiple times under pressure. "Aspirating now," Vanessa announced as dark blood began filling the syringe. The relief was immediate and dramatic. Lieutenant Thompson's breathing became easier, his color improved, and the monitors showed his vital signs stabilizing. "Holy cow," Dr. Cole breathed. "I've never seen anyone work that fast." But Vanessa wasn't finished. She continued the procedure with the methodical efficiency of someone who'd learned that speed and precision could mean the difference between life and death. As she worked, she called out instructions to the medical team with an authority that seemed to come from deep experience. "I need 2 units of O-negative standing by. Get me a portable ultrasound so we can monitor for reaccumulation. And somebody check his pupils. I want to make sure we're not missing a head injury." Logan found himself studying Vanessa with growing curiosity. The transformation from the quiet, uncertain resident he'd picked up at the hospital to the confident medical professional directing this emergency was remarkable. Something about her movements, her terminology, her approach to the crisis felt familiar to him. As Lieutenant Thompson's condition stabilized, the immediate crisis passed. But Vanessa continued monitoring him closely, checking and rechecking his vital signs, adjusting medications, ensuring that the improvement would continue. "He's going to need surgical repair once we get him to a proper facility," she told Dr. Cole. "This was just buying time, but he should be stable enough now for transport." Dr. Cole nodded, clearly impressed. "Dr. Carter, that was remarkable work. Where did you say you trained?" The question hung in the air as Vanessa cleaned up the medical supplies. She was acutely aware that everyone in the room was watching her, waiting for an answer that would explain the skills they'd just witnessed. "Various places," she said carefully. "Emergency medicine teaches you to adapt quickly." It was another non-answer, But before anyone could push for more details, Chief Walsh spoke up from across the room. "You know, Doc, watching you work reminds me of some of the combat medics I served with overseas. There's something about the way you move, the way you handle emergency situations, very similar to what I saw in Afghanistan." Vanessa's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her expression neutral. "I imagine emergency medicine has similarities regardless of the setting," she replied, but Walsh was studying her more carefully now, his expression thoughtful. "Yeah, maybe, but there's something else. The way you set up that procedure, the specific terminology you used. That's not standard civilian medical training." The room fell quiet as everyone processed Walsh's observation. Logan found himself looking at Vanessa with new eyes, remembering his original intel about her having combat medical experience. If Walsh was right, if she had military background, that would explain a lot. "Dr. Carter," Logan said carefully, "is there something about your background that you think we should know?" Vanessa met his gaze, weighing her options. She'd managed to keep her military service hidden for 4 years, building a new life as a civilian physician. But standing in this Navy medical bay, having just saved the life of a military pilot using skills she'd developed in combat zones, the weight of her secret was becoming impossible to bear. The moment of truth was approaching, and everyone in the room could sense it. Before she could answer, Lieutenant Thompson stirred on the table, his eyes fluttering open. His voice was weak but clear as he looked around the room. "What happened?" he asked groggily. Dr. Cole moved to his side immediately. "You had an accident during flight training. You've been unconscious for several hours, but you're going to be okay." Thompson tried to sit up, wincing at the pain in his chest. "The ejection. I remember the ejection. Did everyone else make it back?" "You were the only one involved," Logan assured him. "Solo training flight. Everyone else is accounted for." As Thompson processed this information, his eyes fell on Vanessa. Even in his weakened state, something about her caught his attention. "You're not Navy," he said, studying her civilian clothes and hospital ID badge. "Who are you?" "Dr. Carter," Vanessa said simply. "I helped with your medical treatment." Thompson continued to study her face, his expression growing more puzzled. "Carter, that name. There was a medic in Afghanistan, saved half my squadron when we got hit by an IED. Name was Carter too, but that was..." He paused, his eyes widening as memory clicked into place. "That was years ago, and it was a woman, but she was military." The silence in the medical bay was deafening. Every person in the room was now staring at Vanessa, waiting to see how she would respond to this unexpected recognition. Vanessa felt the walls closing in around her carefully constructed new identity. For 4 years, she'd managed to keep her military service separate from her civilian medical career. She'd changed her appearance, modified her speech patterns, even altered her posture to distance herself from her combat medic days. But now, standing in front of people who understood military culture, who recognized the signs she'd tried so hard to hide, her secret was unraveling. "Lieutenant," she said quietly, "you've been through a serious trauma. Sometimes memory can be unreliable after an injury like yours." But Thompson was more alert now, his pilot training helping him focus despite his physical condition. "No, I remember clearly. It was Operation Red Dawn, September 2019. Our convoy hit an IED outside Kandahar. We had 3 casualties, all critical chest wounds. The regular medic said they couldn't do anything, but then this female Delta Force medic showed up." He paused, his eyes never leaving Vanessa's face. "She performed field surgery that saved all 3 of us. I never forgot her name because my buddy kept saying Carter saved my life over and over during recovery." Logan's expression shifted to intense focus. Delta Force, combat medic, Afghanistan. Suddenly all the pieces were clicking into place. Her surgical skills, her comfort around military personnel, her knowledge of trauma medicine that went far beyond civilian training. "Dr. Carter," Logan said quietly, Is Lieutenant Thompson correct? Were you deployed to Afghanistan as a combat medic? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Vanessa looked around the room at the faces watching her, military personnel who would understand her service, who would respect what she'd done, but who would also change how they saw her forever. She realized that she was standing at another crossroads, perhaps more significant than the one in the hospital parking lot. She could continue to deny her military background, insist that the pilot was confused, and try to maintain her civilian identity. Or she could finally acknowledge the truth about who she really was. The decision was made for her when her borrowed Navy cap slipped slightly, revealing more of her face. Chief Walsh's eyes suddenly widened with recognition. "Wait a minute," he said slowly. "Holy cow, I do know you. You're Sergeant Carter. You were with the 168th Medical Company attached to Delta Force operations." The recognition in Walsh's voice was unmistakable, and it carried the respect that military personnel reserved for truly exceptional soldiers. "You're the medic who saved those Rangers at Firebase Charlie, the one who performed surgery in the middle of a firefight." Logan felt his understanding of the situation shift completely. This wasn't just a civilian doctor with some trauma experience. This was someone who had served with distinction in some of the most dangerous combat operations of the war. "Sergeant Carter," he said, his voice taking on a tone of military respect. "Is Chief Walsh correct?" Vanessa looked around the room one more time, seeing the expectation in their faces. She thought about the life she'd tried to build as a civilian, the identity she'd crafted as just another medical resident. But she also thought about Lieutenant Thompson lying on the table, alive because she'd used skills that could only have been developed in combat. Finally, she reached up and pulled off the borrowed Navy cap completely, letting her hair fall to her shoulders. When she spoke, her voice carried a different quality, stronger, more confident, tinged with the authority that came from having made life and death decisions under the worst possible conditions. "Yes," she said simply. "I'm former Delta Force combat medic Vanessa Carter. I served 4 deployments in Afghanistan between 2017 and 2021. The admission hung in the air like a revelation that changed everything about how everyone in the room understood the past hour. This wasn't a civilian consultant who'd gotten lucky with a difficult procedure. This was a decorated combat veteran who'd brought skills developed in the world's most dangerous combat zones to save the life of a Navy pilot. Logan found himself reassessing everything he'd observed since picking her up at the hospital. Her comfort around military aircraft, her knowledge of trauma procedures, her ability to work under extreme pressure, it all made sense now. "Sergeant," he said, his tone shifting to the respect due to her military rank. "Why didn't you identify yourself when I first contacted you?" Vanessa's expression became guarded again. "Because I left that life behind, Commander. I'm a civilian now." "I've been a civilian for 4 years. I came to Mercy General Hospital to start over to practice medicine in a normal environment where the biggest crisis is hospital politics instead of mortar rounds." "But you kept your skills sharp," Dr. Cole observed. "That wasn't luck what you did with Lieutenant Thompson. That was expertise maintained through practice." "Some things you don't forget," Vanessa said quietly. "Even when you want to." Lieutenant Thompson had been listening to this exchange with growing amazement. "You really were the medic who saved us at Red Dawn. I can't believe it. My mom sent you a letter through the Red Cross after I told her what happened. Did you ever get it?" "I got a lot of letters," Vanessa said softly. "They meant more to me than you could know." The emotional weight of the moment was interrupted by Logan's radio crackling with a transmission from the ship's bridge. "Commander Hayes, this is the bridge. We've received orders to transport Lieutenant Thompson to Balboa Naval Hospital immediately. Can you confirm his condition for transport?" Logan looked to Vanessa for the medical assessment. She checked Thompson's vital signs one more time, her movements still carrying the precision that had impressed everyone. "He's stable for transport," she announced. The pericardiocentesis was successful, but he needs surgical repair of the underlying cardiac injury. Balboa has the facilities to handle that properly. As the medical team prepared Thompson for transport to the helicopter, Logan pulled Vanessa aside for a private conversation. "Sergeant Carter, I need to ask you something. Are you planning to return to civilian medicine after this?" The question surprised her. "That was the plan, yes, though I'm not sure I still have a job to return to. What if I told you that the Navy has been looking for someone with your exact qualifications? Someone with advanced combat medical experience who could help train the next generation of military medics." Vanessa studied his face carefully. "Commander, I appreciate the offer, but I left military service for a reason. I wanted a different kind of life." "I understand that, but consider this. Lieutenant Thompson is alive today because you were available when we needed you. How many other military personnel might benefit from your experience and training?" Before Vanessa could respond, Chief Walsh approached them. "Begging your pardon, Commander, but I couldn't help overhearing. Sergeant Carter, if you're considering a return to military medicine, I can tell you that your reputation in the special operations community is legendary. A lot of people owe their lives to your skills." The praise made Vanessa uncomfortable. She'd never sought recognition for her military service, preferring to let her actions speak for themselves. But hearing it from fellow military personnel who understood the context of her work carried a weight that civilian praise couldn't match. As they prepared to leave the USS Theodore Roosevelt, Vanessa found herself thinking about the path that had led her to this moment. 4 years earlier, she had left military service emotionally and physically exhausted from too many deployments, too many life and death decisions, too many times having to choose between saving one life and trying to save another. She'd chosen civilian medicine because she thought it would be simpler, cleaner, more straightforward. But as today's events had shown her, the skills she'd developed in combat zones weren't something she could simply set aside. They were part of who she was, part of what made her effective as a physician. During the helicopter flight back to San Diego, Logan continued their conversation about her future options. "Sergeant, what if I could offer you a position that combined your military experience with your civilian medical training? Something that would let you save lives without having to return to active combat duty." "What kind of position are you talking about?" "Military medical advisor. You'd work with combat medic training programs, help develop new trauma protocols, consult on cases that require your level of expertise. Based at Balboa Naval Hospital, but with opportunities to work with all branches of the military." The offer was tempting, but Vanessa had spent 4 years trying to distance herself from her military identity. "Commander, I'm flattered, but I'm not sure I'm ready to go back to that world. What if the world needs what you have to offer?" The question lingered between them as the helicopter approached Mercy General Hospital. Below them, Vanessa could see news crews setting up in the hospital parking lot, drawn by reports of the military emergency. Her quiet life as an anonymous resident was about to become very public. As they landed on the hospital rooftop, Vanessa realized that regardless of what decisions she made about her future, her secret was now completely out in the open. The woman who had tried to disappear into civilian anonymity was about to find herself very much in the spotlight. The helicopter touched down on Mercy General Hospital's rooftop with the same precision it had demonstrated hours earlier. But everything had changed. Word of the military emergency had spread throughout the hospital, and news crews had gathered in the parking lot below, their cameras trained on the building. As Vanessa stepped out of the aircraft, she could see the crowd that had assembled on the hospital's lower levels. Staff members pressed against windows, patients and visitors gathered in the lobby, and security guards struggled to manage the growing chaos. Commander Hayes walked beside her toward the stairwell entrance. Sergeant Carter, you should know that this situation is going to attract attention. The Navy will handle media inquiries, but your role in saving Lieutenant Thompson's life isn't going to stay quiet. Vanessa pulled the borrowed Navy cap back over her hair, though she knew it was probably too late for anonymity. I understand, Commander. I've been through media situations before. Different context, though, Logan pointed out. Military operations have built-in information security. Civilian emergencies tend to be more public. As they descended the stairs toward the main hospital floors, they could hear the buzz of conversation and activity echoing through the building. The normal routine of hospital life had been completely disrupted by the dramatic events of the afternoon. Dr. Pierce intercepted them at the elevator bank, but his demeanor had changed dramatically from their earlier confrontation. Behind him stood several other hospital administrators, all looking like they were trying to process information that didn't fit their understanding of their former employee. Dr. Carter, Pierce began, his voice carefully controlled but lacking its earlier arrogance. Commander Hayes has informed me about your background. I think we need to have a serious conversation about what happened here today. Sir, Vanessa replied quietly, I believe I resigned my position before leaving with the commander. There shouldn't be anything to discuss. Actually, there's quite a bit to discuss. Pierce's tone was notably more respectful than it had been hours earlier. The hospital board has been in emergency session for the past hour. We've received calls from the Pentagon, the Navy Department, and 3 different news organizations. Your actions today have created a significant situation. Logan stepped forward. Dr. Pierce, if there are official inquiries about military matters, those should be directed through proper Navy channels. Commander, this isn't just about military matters anymore. Dr. Carter performed life-saving surgery this morning, was terminated for policy violations, and then was revealed to be a decorated combat veteran whose skills saved a pilot's life. The implications are staggering. The admission that he'd made an error was clearly difficult for Pierce, but the afternoon's events had forced him to confront the reality that his judgment had been catastrophically wrong. As they talked, Rachel Bennett approached the group. She'd been waiting near the elevator, clearly hoping to speak with Vanessa privately. Dr. Carter, Rachel said carefully, aware that the conversation was being overheard by hospital administrators. There are some things you should know about what's been happening here while you were gone. What kind of things? Rachel glanced nervously at Dr. Pierce before continuing. The patient you operated on this morning, Mr. Gerald Patterson, his family has been here all afternoon. When they heard about your military background, they wanted to meet you personally. The Patterson family is in the waiting area, Pierce added, his tone notably less dismissive than before. Along with several other families of patients you've treated during your residency, word has spread quickly about your previous experience. Vanessa felt a familiar discomfort with public attention. One of the reasons she'd chosen civilian medicine was to avoid the kind of recognition that sometimes came with military service. She'd wanted to help people quietly, anonymously, without having her personal history become part of the story. The administrative discussion was interrupted by the arrival of a man in a Navy dress uniform who'd apparently taken the elevator up from the main lobby. He approached their group with the bearing of a senior officer. "Commander Hayes?" the newcomer asked. "Yes, sir. Captain Alexander Sterling, commanding officer of Naval Hospital Balboa. I need to speak with you and Dr. Carter immediately about Lieutenant Thompson's condition and the operation conducted at sea." Logan straightened to attention. "Yes, sir. How is the lieutenant?" "He's in surgery now. The cardiac repair is going well, and the surgical team confirms that the pericardiocentesis performed on the ship saved his life. Without that intervention, he wouldn't have survived transport to proper facilities." Captain Sterling turned his attention to Vanessa. Dr. Carter, I understand you're the one responsible for keeping my pilot alive. Sir, I just did what needed to be done. Any qualified trauma specialist would have made the same decisions. Actually, no, they wouldn't have. Sterling's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to making definitive statements. I've reviewed the medical reports from the ship. The procedure you performed required skills and experience that very few civilian doctors possess. Dr. Cole specifically noted that your technique was consistent with advanced military trauma training. Medical malpractice legal consultation has become essential for healthcare workers facing disciplinary action. Professional legal services now offer specialized defense for medical professionals in crisis situations. Dr. Pierce had been listening to this exchange with growing discomfort. The reality of his error in judgment was becoming impossible to ignore. Captain Sterling, are you saying that Dr. Carter's termination this morning might have been inappropriate? I'm saying that Dr. Carter appears to have medical qualifications that weren't reflected in her employment records. The question is why those qualifications weren't known to your administration. The accusation hung in the air like an indictment of Pierce's leadership. Vanessa realized that her careful separation of her military and civilian identities was creating complications she hadn't anticipated. By hiding her combat medical experience, she had inadvertently made it appear as though the hospital had failed to properly evaluate her capabilities. "Captain," she said carefully, "my military service wasn't relevant to my position as a resident. I didn't include it in my employment application because I wanted to be evaluated based on my civilian medical training. But your military experience directly relates to your medical capabilities," Sterling pointed out. "Combat medics receive trauma training that exceeds what most civilian doctors ever encounter. That's clearly relevant to your qualifications." Logan had been watching this discussion with growing understanding of the broader implications. "Sir, I think we might have a bigger issue here. If Dr. Carter has been working as a civilian resident without her military medical credentials being recognized, she might be significantly underutilized in the healthcare system." "Exactly what I was thinking, Commander." Sterling turned back to Vanessa. "Dr. Carter, how many other former military medical personnel do you think are working in civilian healthcare without their combat experience being properly recognized?" The question caught Vanessa off guard. She'd assumed her situation was unique, but now she realized that other veterans might be facing similar challenges in translating their military skills to civilian careers. "I'm not sure, sir. I've tried to keep my military background separate from my civilian career." "Why?" The simple question required a complex answer. Vanessa looked around at the group of people waiting for her response. Military officers who understood her service, hospital administrators trying to process their massive error in judgment, and civilian medical staff trying to understand how they'd missed such significant qualifications. "Sir, military medicine and civilian medicine are different worlds. In combat zones, you make decisions quickly with limited resources and accept risks that civilian hospitals can't tolerate. I thought it would be easier to start fresh, to learn civilian protocols without having my military experience interfere with my training." "But your military experience didn't interfere with your civilian training," Rachel interjected. "It enhanced it. Every attending physician who worked with you commented on your unusual composure under pressure, your surgical skills, your ability to make quick decisions in emergency situations." Dr. Pierce nodded reluctantly, his earlier arrogance replaced by obvious regret. "That's true. Your performance evaluations consistently noted exceptional trauma management capabilities. We assumed it was natural talent combined with intensive study." "It wasn't natural talent," Vanessa said quietly. "It was 4 deployments worth of experience treating combat wounds under impossible conditions. but I didn't think that experience would be valued in a civilian hospital." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of an elderly man accompanied by a middle-aged woman, both looking like they had been waiting anxiously for hours. Rachel Bennett recognized them immediately. "That's Mr. Patterson's son and daughter-in-law," she explained quietly. "The family of the patient you operated on this morning." The man approached Vanessa directly, his eyes filled with gratitude and emotion. "Dr. Carter, I'm Robert Patterson. I wanted to thank you for saving my father's life." Vanessa felt uncomfortable with the direct praise. "Mr. Patterson, I'm glad your father is doing well. Any doctor would have done the same thing." "No, they wouldn't have," the woman beside him said firmly. "I'm Susan Patterson, Robert's wife. I'm also a retired nurse. I was here when you operated on Gerald and I saw what happened. The other doctors were hesitant, worried about protocols and procedures. You acted immediately to save his life." Robert Patterson continued, glancing meaningfully at Dr. Pierce. "Dr. Carter, when we heard about your military service, everything made sense. My father is a Korean War veteran. He would be proud to know that another veteran saved his life." The emotional weight of the family's gratitude was difficult for Vanessa to process, but it also served as a powerful rebuke to Pierce's earlier dismissal of her actions. "Thank you," she said simply. "I'm honored that I could help." As the Patterson family moved away, Captain Sterling resumed the conversation about broader policy implications. "Dr. Carter, I want to make you an offer. The Navy is developing a new program called the Military Civilian Medical Bridge Initiative. We're looking for experienced former military medical personnel to serve as liaisons between military and civilian healthcare systems." "What would that involve?" "Training civilian medical staff in combat trauma techniques, consulting on emergency preparedness, helping other veterans transition their military medical skills to civilian careers, and serving as a resource for cases that require your specific expertise." Commander Hayes added, "The position would be based at Balboa Naval Hospital, but you'd work with civilian institutions throughout Southern California. It's a chance to use both your military experience and your civilian training." The offer was more complex than the simple choice between military and civilian medicine that Vanessa had been wrestling with. This would be something new, a way to honor both parts of her professional identity without having to choose between them. But before she could respond, Dr. Pierce spoke up, his voice lacking any trace of his earlier hostility. "Dr. Carter, before you make any decisions about military positions, I want you to know that Mercy General Hospital would like to offer you a position as well." The words seemed to stick in his throat, but he forced himself to continue. "Director of Emergency Trauma Services. It's a newly created position that would recognize your advanced trauma qualifications and give you the authority to implement new emergency protocols. The board has already approved the position and a substantial salary increase." Rachel Bennett looked amazed by the sudden reversal in Vanessa's circumstances. "This morning you were fired for violating protocol. This afternoon you're being offered director positions. That's got to be some kind of record." But the most dramatic reversal was yet to come. Dr. Pierce's phone rang, and his expression grew increasingly pale as he listened to the caller. "That was the hospital's legal department," he announced, his voice barely controlled. "They've received a formal investigation notice from the state medical board regarding my termination of Dr. Carter. Apparently, the media coverage has triggered a review of our personnel decisions." Captain Sterling nodded grimly. "Dr. Pierce, I should inform you that the Defense Health Agency will also be conducting their own review of how veteran medical credentials are recognized in civilian institutions. Your hospital's handling of Dr. Carter's case will likely become a case study." The weight of institutional scrutiny was clearly overwhelming Pierce. His earlier confidence had been replaced by the realization that his career was now in jeopardy. "Dr. Carter," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I owe you an apology. I made serious errors in judgment today. I allowed my commitment to protocol to override my recognition of your exceptional capabilities." The apology was public and humiliating for Pierce, exactly the kind of accountability that audiences craved. But the consequences were just beginning. Rachel spoke up with information that would make Pierce's situation even worse. "Dr. Pierce, there's something else you should know. The nursing staff has submitted a formal complaint about Dr. Carter's termination. We've documented multiple instances where hospital policies prevented optimal patient care, and we're requesting a full review of emergency protocols." The staff rebellion was the final blow to Pierce's authority. His own people were turning against him, united by their respect for Vanessa and their frustration with his rigid leadership. Next week's story features a female Marine who was underestimated until the enemy attacked her base. Don't miss it. Logan checked his watch and realized that several hours had passed since Lieutenant Thompson's emergency surgery had begun. "Captain Sterling, do we have an update on the pilot's condition?" Sterling consulted his phone for recent messages. "Surgery was successful. Complete repair of the cardiac injury, no complications. He's expected to make a full recovery and return to flight status within 6 months." The news brought visible relief to everyone in the group, but it also served as a powerful validation of Vanessa's life-saving intervention. "Sir," Vanessa said to Captain Sterling, "I'd like to visit Lieutenant Thompson when he's able to receive visitors. I want to make sure his recovery is progressing properly." "I think he'd appreciate that, Dr. Carter. But I should warn you, his story is going to attract significant media attention." Navy pilot saved by decorated combat veteran makes for compelling headlines. The media attention was already beginning to have real consequences for Dr. Pierce. His assistant approached with an update that made his face turn even paler. "Dr. Pierce, the hospital board is requesting your immediate presence in an emergency session. They want to discuss the day's events and your future role at the institution." The summons was clearly disciplinary, and Pierce knew it. His termination of a decorated combat veteran had become a public relations disaster that threatened the hospital's reputation. Captain Sterling presented Vanessa with a formal offer. "Dr. Carter, I'm authorized to offer you a direct commission as Lieutenant Commander in the Navy Reserve, along with appointment as Director of the Military Civilian Medical Bridge Initiative. You'd be responsible for developing protocols that could save thousands of lives." "Sir, that's a generous offer, but I need time to consider my options. This has been an overwhelming day." "Of course, but I should mention that acceptance would mean working closely with congressional committees on veteran health care policy. Your experience could influence legislation affecting millions of veterans." As the sun set over San Diego, the consequences were becoming clear. Dr. Pierce's career was effectively over. The hospital would implement the Carter Protocol for emergency situations, prioritizing patient care over administrative procedures. Dr. Pierce returned from the board meeting, his face ashen. "The board has accepted my resignation," he announced quietly. "Effective immediately. Dr. Carter, my termination of you today was the worst decision of my career. You're exactly the kind of physician this hospital needs." The public admission provided the justice audiences demanded. The man who destroyed careers with rigid protocol adherence had finally faced consequences. "Commander Hayes," Vanessa said finally, "I think I'm ready to stop hiding from who I really am." Logan smiled. "What does that mean, Sergeant?" "It means I accept Captain Sterling's offer. It's time to build bridges instead of walls." Vanessa finally understood that her two identities, combat medic and civilian doctor, weren't contradictory. They were complementary. Lieutenant Thompson appeared in a wheelchair, awake despite recent surgery. "Sergeant Carter, I wanted to thank you personally. The doctors tell me I wouldn't have made it without your intervention." "Lieutenant, I'm just glad you're okay. There's something else. Your actions today have been reported to the highest levels of military command. There's talk of a commendation for your service." Rachel approached with final information. "Dr. Carter, the Patterson family has started a petition to name the new emergency protocol after you." The gesture was touching, but Vanessa realized the real memorial would be the lives saved by veterans whose military medical experience was finally being recognized and valued in civilian healthcare. "Some wars never end," she reflected. "They just change battlefields." Sometimes the most important battles are fought not with weapons, but with skills to heal the wounded and courage to bridge gaps between different worlds. For the first time in 4 years, Dr. Vanessa Carter, Sergeant Carter, was ready to fight that battle with everything she had. Up next, you've got 2 more incredible stories waiting on your screen. If this one hit you, tap to watch the next, and make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. Oh, and drop your city in the comments. I want to see where you're watching from.